All right, so let's see how we can automate this data retrieving process. We had retrieved just 2026 weekly box office. Okay, so to make it more automated, we need to use the underlying coding. So I'm gonna use open this advanced editor. That's gonna show you the underlying what we call the M code that drives this entire data retrieving process. Okay. So we don't need to really learn all the kind of details about this programming language. We just need to learn a little bit of some key elements there, and we will be able to do this automation. Okay. So here you can see this source, the first line here, actually the second line. Okay. This is the website we try to retrieve data from. Okay. If you take a look at this URL and you take a look at this URL, okay, the box office weekly for 2026, okay, that's where, remember we copy and pasted this URL, okay, that's basically what's showing up in here, all right. However, as I said, in the landing page, there's no indication of year, all right, so that's why we want to actually make the year elements show up in this URL. So that's as I showed you before, you can just play around, go to different years. Okay, 2023 show up here, right? Then you go back to 2026. Now you see the URL has this year elements embedded. So actually, I'm going to use, instead of the original landing page URL, I'm going to use this URL which has the year elements embedded there. Okay, I'm going to just copy and paste that URL here. Instead of using the original landing page, I'm going to use this one. Okay, as you can see, this new one with the year 2026 embedded is going to show you the exactly same information, the same web page actually. All right, so once you have this, to make this process automated, we are basically doing the following. We're going to first get the year 2026, okay? Then we are going to get data for year 2025, 2024, 2023, and so on and so forth, okay? So each time we try to retrieve data, we're basically changing this parameter to a different year, all right? So that's why to take advantage of this, we need to define a kind of a function. Okay, and in this function, there's an input, which is the year element. Okay, and we let this input change from year to year. So for one kind of round of operation, we will define this input as 2026. For the second round of operation, we'll define this element as equal to 2025. Okay, for the third round, it's going to be 2024. So in this way, we can basically retrieve different years of data um, just by changing this parameter value. Okay, so to define a parameter, I will just use a pair of parentheses here. Okay, and I'm going to define parameter called year. Okay, this is our parameter, and this parameter is defined as a text format. So I'm going to type as text. Okay, instead of a number. Okay, so this year is a text parameter. The reason I'm using a text is because here where this number of this year number 2026 is part of a URL. So URL is a kind of a string, okay? Kind of different letters, numbers put together in a string. Okay, we call it string instead of a number. Okay, this is shown up as a part of this in long string. Okay, so if something is part of a long string, then this parameter, although it show up as a kind of in terms of a number, once it's embedded in a URL in a string, then by nature it's just a text format. Okay, so that's why I define year as text. So it's part of a text string. All right. And after this parenthesis, I will have the following equal sign and a greater than sign. Okay, that's just the grammar of this programming language. Okay, this way I defined a parameter year, and this year is defined as a text string. Okay, and this year is going to be used as an input in the following code. All right, and the next thing I'm going to change is, instead of this static year 2026, I'm going to replace this particular 2026 with that parameter called year. All right. So I'm going to replace it with year here. Okay. However, well, we cannot just stop here because year is defined as a string parameter. Okay. So it has to be connected with the rest of the URL in a specific way. Okay. So here, um, we are going to use, I'm going to type out first. I'm going to explain why just in a second. Okay. So here is the way you have to kind of write the code to incorporate this year parameter inside this URL. Okay. So this part, okay, this kind of quotation mark is basically the first segment of this URL. All right. Then after, because we are talking about a entire string here, okay, so this string is being quoted in a pair of quotation marks. Then after this, we'll have this ampersand sign. Okay, this ampersand sign is basically a kind of operator to connect different string parameters. Okay, so this is our first part of the string. This is our first part of string. Okay, after this, we're going to connect this with the second part of the string. And this second part of the string is basically this year parameter. Okay, to connect one string, which I highlight here, with the second string, the year string, they have to be connected by an operator. So here the ampersand sign is basically the operator that connect two strings. Okay, so now this year string is being connected with the first part of the URL. Okay, but this string does not complete. Okay, it's not completed yet. After this year parameter, we have another kind of slash sign have to be included as part of the URL. Okay, so that's why I have this slash sign also included in a pair of quotation marks. Okay, because it's part of the URL. So this is the last element of this entire URL. Okay, and to kind of embed this last part of the URL into this entire string, I also need to have a ampersand, so that after the year parameter, I need to have an operator to connect to the last piece of the string of this entire URL. Okay, so this entire thing will tell you the exact URL we're going to um, give Power BI to retrieve a particular year's box office data. Okay, so think about it. This year is a parameter. So if you give this parameter a value of 2026, then it's gonna be input here as part of the string. Then this URL is gonna retrieve the box office data for year 2026. If you have this year specified as 2025, then Power BI is going to use this URL and retrieve year 2025's box office data. Okay, so this is a way you kind of change a particular number in a URL into a parameter. Okay, so here instead of 2026, a kind of static or specific number, I replaced it with a parameter called year. Okay, and because year is no longer a particular number, it's a parameter. It has to be part of this URL string. So as a way to connect this parameter with the rest of the kind of pieces of this URL, you have to use the ampersand sign. Okay, at the beginning of this parameter and after the parameter, such that this entire kind of combination of strings becomes a useful URL you can use to retrieve data. Okay, so this is the first step to kind of make this process automated. So once this year is defined as a parameter and used as part of this URL, okay, the next thing is you need to define the value of year. You have to have a list of different years: 2026, 2025, 2024, and so on and so forth. And then the Power BI is going to go through that list one number at a time and input that number into this advanced editor, into this piece of code to retrieve that particular year's data. Then once 1 year's data is retrieved, the Power BI is gonna go to the next number in the list, for example, 2025, then replace this year parameter with that 2025 to retrieve box office data for year 2025. After that, again goes down the list to get to year 2024 and replace this year parameter with number 2024 to retrieve box office data for year 2024 and so on and so forth. Okay, for example, you want this list to go from 2026 all the way down to 2021. So once the list gets to the last element, 2021, then this year parameter is going to be replaced by this particular number 2021, and Power BI is going to retrieve year 2021's box office data. Okay.